Comparison price for Monday, December 16th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee. And this show, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sakaris alongside Sea to Sky update man Blake Price. Thank you for that on the weekend. And four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, Hit and Switches, conducting things. We nearly lost Blake this weekend. He was mere minutes away from being caught in that landslide on the Sea to Sky. Mm-hmm. The photo you took was like you were the first or second car there.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that, scene. But it was under 30, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Terrifying moment from the weekend.
Yeah,
so.
And our thoughts with those that were lost in that slide. Terrible stuff.
Awful. We have so much to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Do we ever?
What a weekend. And we are going to get to the other team that screwed up royally on the weekend, the Seahawks, eventually. But there's the key team in this market that we have to get to first.
Yeah, exactly. With the Siri Mitsubishi poll question, we're asking you, is it inevitable that one of JT Miller or Elias Pettersson has to be traded? You can vote yes. You can vote no. Do so at the Sakaris and Price X and YouTube channels. Blake, as always, you get first take on this. What do you think?
I go back to the scorn I received one day in the Jim Robson broadcast gondola when on a post-game show or pre-game show, I can't remember which, I uttered to Rick Ball and said, just watch. There's going to be a day in the not-too-distant future where both Corey Schneider and Roberto Luongo don't play for this team. And he said, you're crazy, as if. Why would that ever come to pass? And lo and behold, it did. Yeah. It was just a guess by my... I don't have as good a read on this situation, but I'm starting to feel an inevitability sink in here.
Yeah. You voted yes?
Yes.
Why aren't the stanchion? JT Miller returns and the floodgates of whispers of dissension get released immediately into the world to the media. Enough smoke here over the years that, it's very much now a story about can they coexist between EP and JT. Even Linden versus Burry was never this spicy. And some of you may have noticed that the high winds on Saturday ripped the Elias Pettersson banner hanging from Rogers Arena.
Oh, God.
Some might read some symbolism into that. Canucks had to close a gate there Saturday, ward people in a different direction. I voted yes as well. I voted yes, both from a broad macro point of view. Players don't typically spend their whole career with one team. JT Miller's already twice been traded. So it stands to reason that, one of these. But in the more narrow discussion of whether or not they can coexist, I think it's coming to that because I think it's been coming to that for some time. I think JT Miller's nature is to be the alpha and run the room. And I think as soon as his game caught up with his disposition, his DNA, the way he's wired, as soon as his game caught up to that here in Vancouver, by hell or high water, he was going to run this room. And I think that explains some of the friction between him and Bo Horvat. I think he knew full well that it was coming down to a decision between himself and Bo Horvat. And I think the same dynamic is playing out here with Elias Pettersson as well. And as we know, JT runs the room in a certain way. Was mentioned to us last week. I think it was Darren Dreger. Elliot Friedman talking about that on Donnie and Dolly today, saying he likes to push buttons. He's very demanding. The team has talked to him about that and with the team about accepting it more. To me, it doesn't sound like management and the coaching staff has sided with the aggrieved on the emotional leadership.
Well, I want to make it abundantly clear, too, for those tuning in here early that maybe got distracted. These are busy weekends in the holiday season where you're out.
Fair enough.
So don't tune into the start of this show and go, oh, they're still on this Miller thing. Folks, the coach said things both post-game on Saturday and yesterday at practice that has furthered this story. And we're going to get to it in a little bit here. But this is not a repeat show from Friday. There is further stuff to add to this storyline, and that's the concern.
Do you want to get to that now?
Well, let's talk about Siri Mitsubishi, and then we'll get to that.
Well, okay. Yeah. So, look, Elliott floated Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram from Buffalo. Cousins, a Whitehorse kid who actually played here at Delta Hockey Academy. Byram, of course, from Cranbrook and a former Vancouver Giant. And he said, look, his mind just went there, but he also said he knows the Canucks and Sabres have talked. You don't think there's any way they're going to trade Elias here quickly?
Not for that package.
Okay.
Definitely not for that package. I mean, I can't say never because I don't have anything else in front of me. Like,
right, okay.
But like that kind of a package,
right.
Not a chance.
So, I have always had suspicions that Elias Pettersson is not this management team or coaching staff's guy. I think Jim Rutherford arrived here and wasn't wholly convinced that Elias Pettersson was the number one center to win you a Stanley Cup. I don't think Elias Pettersson is a Rick Tocchet style of player. I don't think he practices well. I think he's not the easiest guy to coach. I think for the most part he wants to be left alone, that he's particular about his line mates. And, of course, we know the coach and the player had a differing opinion on, what is hurt and what is injured with his knee last year. In fact, and I've said on the show, I think this season is about management and the coaching staff determining whether they think they can win a Stanley Cup with Elias being in a forward front line 1C or worst case scenario 2C role. We also know that Elias's trade protection kicks in the new league year on July 1st. So to me, that is what this season is about for Rutherford, Alvin, and Tocchet. It's not just about can you get back to the playoffs, can you get through Edmonton, but big picture, and you can remember how aspirational that Patrick Alvin was in that end-of-year press conference last year. Who are going to be the guys who deliver you a Stanley Cup? Frankly, I think it's a little akin to the Boston Bruins once upon a time with Joe Thornton.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an old-school organization with its ownership group, and Jeremy Jacobs was very much running the team at the time. And you still had Harry Sindin there. And I just don't think that the Boston Bruins, well, it's evident. How often do you trade a number one center? Not very often. But I think the Bruins came to the conclusion that they were not going to win a Stanley Cup with Joe Thornton. And I think that was somewhat about Joe's personality and attitude. Jolly Joe, lighthearted Joe, lots of humor there. Didn't really draw a firm line with his team. Nathan McKinnon insisting on chickpea pasta, he was not. And I think that was also a little bit to do with Thornton's game, that here was a really big guy who didn't really play that big, mean, nasty
he had
style.
Back-to-back playoff seasons where he did almost nothing. 12 games in total, 3 points.
Right. And
that was his undoing.
Right. And, of course, Elias is coming off a postseason where he did absolutely nothing. And so the Bruins made a trade, and it turned out to be a very bad trade with San Jose. But at the end of the day, the Boston Bruins were right. Joe Thornton did not win a Stanley Cup.
But the difference between
the
difference between that and this is you've thought that Rick Tocchet doesn't think that Elias Pettersson can win him the cup. That's not a part of the equation. Rick Tocchet will not be the coach of the Vancouver Canucks in 3 years' time.
I don't know. Yeah.
It just mathematically doesn't happen these days in the NHL. To go 6 years as the Canucks head coach, it just doesn't happen. Coaches do not last that long any longer. It just doesn't happen. So it's more about what the management thinks about Elias Pettersson than it does the head coach in this.
Well, I agree, Blake, except that I think people would argue the window is this year and next. Except you have Demko under the cheap deal. Or maybe 2 more years if you want to include the final year of Hughes' deal.
But for Elias Pettersson, at least,
right,
his no-trade clause kicks in this summer.
But that's why.
And are they ready to make that decision, this big decision?
Yes.
They're going to make in the next few months? Yes. I don't think they're quite ready there.
I think
and it's a full no-move clause.
I think so, and that's why I think Tocchet's opinion does matter. Now,
a coach's opinion.
You could argue it is super risky to do this. Stop, no, don't pass, go. I mean, look at number 1 centermen who are traded and the returns. Joe Thornton, Tyler Seguin, Jack Eichel. I don't think either of them reaped the sort of bounty that the trading teams were hoping for. I mean, you can – Eichel trade is not fully done. There's some very young players there in Buffalo who very well may emerge. The Seguin deal needed Boston some pretty good players. Louis Eriksson was still a good player then. Riley Smith was still a good player, and they mishandled – those guys, or they let Eriksson walk and traded Riley Smith to Florida. Actually, if you do the Thornton trade tree, the proceeds of the Thornton trade tree did not contribute to their 2011 Stanley Cup victory, but Dennis Seidenberg actually was somebody who they were able to get through several trades on the Thornton trade tree. Anyways.
This is an $11.6 million player that is in the first year of an 8-year contract.
Yep.
And a coach's opinion is going to get him traded in 12 months? I don't think so.
Because I think management and the coach share the same opinion, though, Blake. That's where.
I think management has questions, but I don't think that they believe that.
But they have their coach telling them this guy ain't it.
Right, but they also know what their coach is Rick Tocchet. They know what Rick Tocchet likes.
Okay.
So they're gonna hear it. Well, but I don't think they treat it as utmost gospel. They're gonna make their own determination.
Rutherford with a cryptic comment along those regards that patience, management and coaching staffs have different patience levels.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we say no. I think it would be super risky because JT is an older player. Because
much older.
Look, if JT has somewhere between irritated and bullied players in the room, you move Pettersson, you're only going to fuel more of JT's style of leadership. So I think it's a super risky trade to make. But I also am not resigned to the fact that you're going to lose it.
5 years.
He's an incredible
age
player,
difference, which is an eon.
Yeah, but he's an incredible player. If you've done a good job on pro and amateur scouting, it is very possible that you can get a package for Elias Pettersson that makes you a better team.
And that's why I'm saying I'm not going to say never, but this is also the management group that when asked for plaudits from JT Miller about what they did to help him during his personal leave of absence, he made sure he left them out.
Yes, and that's fair.
So I don't know that relationship is necessarily hunky-dory.
Big picture, do you just think there's too much drama here for them to be successful this year?
That's more where I'm at. Just that conceptually, I think there's too much here. And I don't even know that it's JT Miller versus Elias Pettersson. It might just be JT Miller versus a lot of other people.
Yes.
It might just be.
Or it could be full decampment, JT and those who are with him.
And it's just until
versus those who aren't.
So it might be that more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But only they know how bad it is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, folks, we're at the point where there's something there. Now,
there was always something there. They've acknowledged there's something there. They don't see eye to eye.
But that's different than there being something there that every day is hanging in the room.
The question is, is it debilitating?
Right.
Is whatever differences of personality or opinion that Elias and JT have, can they be resolved? Can they be bridged? Can they work together for the greater good? Or is that simply too much to ask?
And Matt, I almost wonder, by virtue of all this, is there now a third decampment of coach? Because I don't know the coach is necessarily the best buddy of Miller after all this.
Well, he gets asked, what's your relationship like with JT? And his initial response is, well, you have to ask him. And then going on to laud him. Well, I think everybody recognizes that JT is a Tocchet-style player.
Right.
I think everybody recognized that last year JT Miller had a sensational season, in part because of the coaching of Rick Tocchet. And let's face it, Tocchet pushed every right button last year. That was a Midas touch coaching season, the likes of which we're not seeing this year, and we probably won't see for some time again.
Right, but just because he's the exact kind of player, of which he absolutely is, he's a Rick Tocchet lab kind of player, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily working out on the human level, right? So
it's lease month at Siri Mitsubishi. Leasing a car, better option, lower monthly payment, flexibility to drive a new vehicle every few years, convenience of staying under warranty, minimal maintenance costs, plus you avoid the long-term commitment of ownership, plus the depreciation hit. This month at Siri Mitsubishi, you can lease an Outlander PHEV 2024. It's what Blake and I are driving. We absolutely love it. For $182 a week. If you want the gas option, it's yours for $105 a week. The Eclipse Cross is just $100 a week, and the RVR only $87 a week. Plus, skate away with a $1,000 winter tire credit and no charge to your maintenance package. And don't miss out on the $5,000 government rebate on the Outlander PHEV while it lasts. Or while this government lasts. See dealer for details and return. All leases are OAC. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820. 104th Avenue in Surrey. Or online.
We're not going to break into programming if JT goes down. And the other JT, by the way, we have to clarify, by the way. So when you say anytime today on social media, I think JT is done here, please add Miller if that's your inclination. There's going to be some confusion.
You have competition with regards to trouble in the
JT's.
Caucus. In the caucus. Oh, my.
Oh, my God.
And they're having their holiday party tomorrow, the federal liberals. Awkward. Top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Tocchet calls out the players' emotional investment after another no-show loss on home ice, 5-1 to Boston, where they are booed off the ice. Let's hear from Coach Tocchet here about executing the game plan, because he was mightily disappointed in the things that they talked about going into the Boston game and then what he saw during the 60 minutes against the Bruins.
Coaching staff, you got to be careful. We can't be frustrated. I'm sure a couple of coaches are frustrated because we had a game plan that some guys didn't execute the game plan for whatever reason. So I think sometimes as a coach, you take it not personal, but you get pissed about it, right? But like I said, this group bounces back. Got to give them a lot of credit there, obviously. But I just think there were some plays out there to be made, and for whatever reason, we were a little tense tonight.
He said similar things in October, if you'll remember, Blake. The 4-3 overtime loss to the Carolina Hurricanes. And then that was followed by the stinker where they get destroyed by New Jersey 6-0. What I mean is, the coaching staff getting pissed off because you've gone over certain things you want to do, you want to accomplish the way you want to play against a specific opponent, and it's in one year, out the next.
I kind of write that off in October, though, because it's so early. Everybody's getting their,
and you're still coaching, you're still teaching somewhat in October. You're still trying to get that system indoctrinated.
If you told that coach then, if you went in the time machine and said, "Hey, by the way, coach, you're going to feel the same on December the 16th," he would probably, his jaw would hit the floor and go, "Really? They're still not getting it December the 16th?" Yeah, still aren't.
But it's his way of saying that some of these guys aren't coachable. At least in these specific instances, if not more broadly. And that's particularly the case when he also talks about the emotional investment of some players. Let's hear from Coach on that.
You have, let's face facts, 4 or 5 guys, they're struggling. 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 4 or They're struggling to get them emotionally invested in the game, and that's my job to get these guys. Those certain guys, we got to find another gear from them. They got to understand that it's the NHL, and you can't play one good game and then two bad. You got or whatever. You got to be. This is a game, a sport, the NHL, where you have to be jacked up to play the game. You have to be emotionally in the game, and sometimes the guys takes them like 30 minutes to get in the game for whatever reason.
And so my question there is, does he bother getting onto that pulpit for role players?
No.
That are not emotionally
involved?
involved?
Of course not. When he says 3, 4, 5 players and doesn't name them.
Maybe one's a role player in that 5 group, but that's about it.
And pretty fair, he's not talking about Quinn Hughes, right?
Yeah.
And pretty fair, he's not talking about JT Miller.
He might be talking about the starts of JT sometimes.
Well, okay, but he
but overall, probably not.
He set up their only goal, season high, 7 hits, 72% Corsi, 63% in the circle. Like, second game back, and JT was pretty darn good. No, I think it's Pettersson. I think it's quite clearly Pettersson. I think Rick is expressing some frustration that he and his staff don't seem to be able to get through to the young man. And I think they're not able to get through to the young man because I don't think Elias trusts very easily. I think to some degree he's a high enough hockey IQ guy that he sort of feels like, I've got this. I can figure this out. And I also wonder, whether he feels comfortable in the room because of the dynamic with JT. That's what I am starting to believe. That Elias is looking around and going, okay, this just isn't my comfort zone. This doesn't feel like my franchise. It feels like I'm on the other side of a divide here with the head coach, with the other centerman, with management.
Do you think that Elias Pettersson would ever ask for a trade?
I think there's a world where he could, yes. I think he wanted to slow play that free agency last year with a purposefully.
Now, if you're the Vancouver Canucks, you have to make sure that you don't get to that point with that player.
Absolutely.
You have to farm the relationship to the point where you promise him things will get better because of this, that, and the other, even if you intend on trading him, because the minute that he says, I want out, of course, your market changes for that player.
Like Jack Eichel.
Yeah.
Where Alex Tuch's a fine player. I think they had higher hopes for Peyton Krebs. He was a first-round pick. Hasn't produced offensively at all as a young NHLer. May still come, but I think at best you're looking at a bottom to middle 6 forward there.
Yeah.
And then they got 2 draft picks there who are both pretty good prospects, including Riley Heidt up in PG, who could very well turn into a good player. So that trade is not yet lost for the Buffalo Sabres, but one of the 2 more central pieces is already not working out. And, as good as Tuch is, he's not Jack Eichel.
Well, and if it does pan out for them, it'll be a trade that pushed their success back almost a decade. Right? And so when you make a trade, but you don't get the dividends of it for a decade, that doesn't help the GM that makes the trade much.
Right. So Tocchet had a night to sleep on all this and convened a practice on Sunday, and more about practicing here in a second. But was asked about everything again after the Sunday's practice, and, he was
sounded like this.
Still singing from the same hymn book. Here's Coach.
And sometimes, guys aren't going to have their A game. We understand that, but some guys were just not engaged. And we don't have the team to have 3 or 4 or 5 passengers. We just don't have it. Edmonton, they could have 4 or 5 guys sleeping. They got guys that can win the game for them. We are a team that needs everybody to play. And that was kind of most of the disheartening thing yesterday is we had some guys that weren't ready to play.
In those earlier answers he gives, he's talking about how, that's on us, a coaching staff. We got to find a way to get him ready. I don't sense his heart is in that statement.
No.
I think he's offering that I think he's offering that because that's how you're supposed to talk. Because at the end of the day, I think, he does put a lot of accountability on himself and his coaching staff.
But professionals need to show up ready, and he knows that too.
He knows that too. And I think he's sitting there going, how many fucking times can we message this before it ges through? And I don't blame him.
I also don't buy the second half.
Especially on home ice. Like, it's appalling what's going on home ice.
I also don't buy the second half that he fully believes that either, in that, right, nobody on this team is McDavid or Draisaitl. But I don't think you believe that your superstars are light years behind Draisaitl and McDavid. I think you'd like to believe that your two 100-point guys are that very next step down.
And your 90-point defenseman is every bit what they are, just on the blue line.
Right. So can't any one of those three or two of those three on any night? Like, the chances of all three having a killer night? No. But that's why you want more, so that you only need two of three to drag you across the finish line. And there's not a lot of dragging happening outside of Quinn.
Bottom line is, because of the quality of the superstar, I think there are actually nights where the Canucks can get away with 3-4 passengers. Hell, they've been dragging this defense core along through more than a third of a season.
And in previous seasons, I think those three guys have taken turns dragging the team across the finish line. But you haven't seen that this year, really, outside of Quinn.
And poor Thatcher Demko, I mean, he's hung out to dry again, 2 games back, and both times the team played like horse shit in front of him. And Thatcher told us all, look, it's not going to be the, guy at the tip top of his game who returns. He was going to need some time to figure things out, and that is proving true as well. He'll get another opportunity against the Avalanche here tonight, and what turns out to be a pretty big game to end this 6-game homestand, right? We usually do it more along the lines of the road trips, like what would be a good record for this road trip, what would be a good record for that road trip, but this homestand is coming to an end, Blake, and there are 2 wins, an overtime loss, and 2 regulation defeats. So this is the tipping point game for your homestand as well. If you win it, you are slightly above 500 because of the loser point against
St. Louis. You kept your head above water.
But you want to be better than that at home, for God's sakes. That's a decent road trip.
Yeah.
But 7 of 12 points at home, you want more than that.
I said it had to be 4-2 for you to be making up ground now on your poor home record. You needed to go 4-2, and let's go to the into the chat here a little bit on YouTube. Dave H. 1 week you say Petey and Miller golf together, and then this week they hate each other. It's a complicated relationship.
Yep.
And again, I don't think they hate each other.
Nope.
In the sense of you're a bad human, I hate you. I think it's a difficult working environment for them, and that they can park that and go play a round of golf. And I don't think it's necessarily their favorite round of golf either. They'd probably pick a different foursome, but sometimes those are the guys that are available, and that's who you play. But they can do that, yes. But ultimately, when push comes to shove in a heated environment in the National Hockey League, ice surface and room, I don't know. I don't know if that's the perfect fit for them.
And I know it's difficult for Canucks fans to hear because you want to think that they all get along and they love each other as much as you love them. I get that. We've seen that for years here.
Calder kid Petey. Do you guys watch the games? We do. Petey is not the problem. Why aren't you bitching about Brock? He's not doing anything.
Brock has not been good since coming back from the concussion. That much is fair.
But Brock is not the franchise cornerstone, and the other 3 guys are. That's why. It's as simple as that. Do other players deserve some criticism? For sure. But ultimately, you look to the biggest difference makers, and then if they're doing their job and they're still not getting results, well, then you move on down. But if the cornerstone players aren't there, you start there. There's other wingers that have picked up the slack. You can say Brock's not doing anything, but other guys are doing things. Max Sassen's had a couple of great games in a row here, for heaven's sakes. Other wingers have stepped up. So that's not the end of the world in filling out the depth part of it. If your superstars aren't going, does it go?
And let's remember, talking number 3, 4, 5. right? So it's not an either Brock or Pettersson.
No, he might have included
it's
it in there
multiple.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, Brock has not been good since coming back from the concussion. That much is clear. What's he got? 2 goals since come back? 2 goals, I believe, and 6 assists. So he's got 8 points and 3, 6, 9, 10.
I mean, that's not too far off his normal pace.
Not too far off, but no.
That is his normal pace, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a point-per-game player yet.
What are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
I want to remind you that the Squirrel Chaser Pale Ale, it's on special for the month of December, and it's a great, pleasing beer for parties, because you know when you're organizing parties, you're like, something that everybody will enjoy. The Squirrel Chaser is that. Mm-hmm. Go check it out at your favorite government and private liquor stores.
I picked up a 4-pack yesterday. The other thing, the festive green can.
I never thought of that.
Looks
good aesthetics.
in the fridge.
Good aesthetics.
Christmas time, it's a nice green to have in the fridge or in the ice bucket, wherever you put your beers. Jim Rutherford joined after hours. And look, straight talking Jimmy, dropping bombs left, right, and center. This was not that media availability. But there was still some pretty, I would argue, pithy stuff there. He's asked about the home record, and he talks about the players getting a lot of days off at home. They don't practice a lot at home, and then they don't play well because they don't practice. And then he made sure to be seen watching practice.
Man, yesterday. He loves practice, doesn't he?
He's
loves
coming on 75 years old.
Practice.
Like, what guy of that era do you know that doesn't like practice?
We're talking about practice.
Well, he's talking about practice. But Tocchet is a practice guy too, right? Tocchet has said in the past, he doesn't like when guys take maintenance days. We only have so many practices. Oh, because these scheduled days off at the beginning of the month, we can't practice.
Man, honestly, I can
There's
say
not a lot of Sunday practices in the NHL these days when you've played Saturday night, and yesterday was a practice day.
I was sensitive to this perception even at the start of the season. I can't say that there has been a day off that I've been surprised by that hasn't been accommodated by they practice. I would have thought that would have been a day off. Mm-hmm. To me, it's been a wash. Like, I have not seen a pattern where I've thought,
well, with your 4 mandated days off set at the start of the month,
and there's no getting around that, Jim.
There's really no getting around that.
I don't know. I think they practiced pretty much when they should be practicing by the CBA.
Yep.
And you do eventually have to give some days off as well, just because of the rigors. Like, this has been a tough stretch of schedule. They needed that day off on, when was it? Monday?
Friday.
Friday?
They had a day off Friday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Rutherford says they're a couple of players away. But he also noted in a different part of the interview that patience for management and patience for the coaching staff are 2 different things. To me, that sounds like Tocchet has been in management's office banging the table on something. We absolutely got to get this, or we absolutely can't get by anymore with that. And look, we know prices are sky high. We know there's not a lot of declared sellers. We know there are very competitive markets for top 4 defensemen. So Jim and Patrick right now have those sets of realities, variables to deal with. It's not always as easy and as cut and dry as we all, including coaches, want to make it, right? With personnel. It can be quite difficult. And look, it's probably even easier these days with the salary cap where it is as compared to where it was in the last few years. These guys have been movers and shakers, Alvin and Rutherford. I anticipate they will be that again. It just hasn't happened yet. And they only have until, Thursday? Wednesday. The holiday roster freeze begins in the evening on Wednesday, and it lasts till the early morning hours of Saturday, December 28th, Eastern time. So late night.
I was going to say they will have a week and a half of where there's no more Marcus Pettersson rumors, although maybe those will calm down now because he's injured.
Yeah, he's injured. So, look, I think Rutherford knew full well what he was messaging. But when he was asked about the Canucks as contenders, he said they took a big step last year, a bigger step than virtually anyone could have imagined, including Jim Rutherford. And he talked about how they've lost some good players since then. And Nikita Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, who are certainly not setting the world afire in Boston, but were good players for the Vancouver Canucks last year. Frankly, first half of Ian Cole last year was a very good player for the Vancouver Canucks. So, what he's basically saying is like, look, this is the next challenge for the group. This is what they have to get over. Try and maintain what you did last year without necessarily having the same player group and the same depth of player, of forward and of defense as they had last year. And he even joked about you can't go across the street to Costco and pick up a player or two.
You cannot. That's one thing you can't get there. Pretty much everything else.
That's true. On Boeser, he said they're going to deal with that at the trade deadline. They're evaluating a situation. He mentioned term being a key there. So we've talked a little bit about the Boeser contract extension. Of course, he's in his final year before unrestricted free agency, and I think Rutherford further gave us insight into that's going to be a deadline matter, like Pettersson was a deadline matter last year. Term is very much going to be the key because I think they look at it and see a guy who is older than Elias and what Elias signed out last year. Not to mention a player who by no means is a fleet of foot. How's he going to age? And look, I leave open the possibility too, Blake, that if they don't like what they're hearing from Camp Boeser, that could be another big trade that they swing later in the season.
And if Brock Boeser really doesn't want to leave Vancouver, I think he probably reads those tea leaves as well. Like, they have to have a real honest assessment, him and his agent, if they want to stay here. If they're totally open to changing, well, then they'll just go and put themselves up for auction, and they'll do pretty well at that. But if they want to remain here, they're going to have to be honest about what he brings to the table. And again, what that the strange thing is if the reporting is true and that 8.5 is sort of where they're starting at, that is a fair number, but it still might not be one that the Vancouver Canucks would necessarily want to pay.
Especially not over 7 or 8 years.
Right.
Flu has run through the team here. That's why poor Kevin Lankinen's been sidelined. Derek Forbert as well, just when he got back into the lineup. Can we agree that Mark Friedman is not an NHL defenseman and that you cannot run out Mark Friedman for multiple games in a row and not anticipate that it's going to hurt you? Yes. He was -3 on Saturday. Everybody loves his story. Everybody loves his pugnacity. Everybody loves the fact that he's a good organizational soldier, will go weeks without playing a game and then gets dropped in and gives you a hell of an effort.
And block a puck with his face.
Exactly.
Literally, I think it was his first game in, for God's sakes.
But look, he is – you just can't be playing him night after night after night and anticipate that he isn't going to help you. Vinny Desharnais gets back into the lineup tonight. He will skate with Eric Brandstrom on the third pair. The fourth period.
So cold all of a sudden.
The fourth period reporting on the Canucks trying to move Desharnais and find him a new home indicates that the Maple Leafs and the Oilers, from whence he came, were interested in Desharnais in free agency.
It's going to be another test here for this defense corps in front of Thatcher Demko, who deserves a whole lot more than what he has received in the first 2 games since coming back defensively. And to me, I think Rick Tocchet should bring that up. Look what you have given that guy in the corner who worked as hard and had to wait as long as he did. Be better. And I actually can't wait to see what this game looks like, because this, to me, they've thrown up some stinkers. And you mentioned the back-to-back bad ones, Carolina and Jersey. But again, early enough in the season, I was willing to write that off. If they throw up back-to-back stinkers now, oh my God, all bets are off.
Let's hear from the captain who says the team will respond tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that everyone probably, after a night like that, needs to evaluate their own game, and then on a team basis, we did that yesterday before practice. But, we get a lot of competitors in here. I'm sure people want to bring their A game tonight.
I would hope so. Scott on Twitter says Pettersson did an interview yesterday, and I have never seen him look so miserable or things that bad. It's really hard to gauge. Elias often looks and sounds miserable.
But I don't know that that's necessarily reflective.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw somebody in the chat earlier saying, I think it was Dylan. Do you think Pettersson actually wants the room, though? Like, as much as we were talking about
I don't think he wants the room. I just don't think he wants a outsized influence from Miller.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody, and this was a couple of years ago, said to me, who knows both guys. So two things. I think it was a few days after they signed JT Miller that Labor Day. Somebody who knows both guys reasonably well said just matter-of-factly to me, well, now they've signed Miller, so eventually they're going to lose Pettersson. I sort of went, that's interesting. And then somebody else who knows both guys pretty well said to me, JT says a lot of things. He says a lot of things at loud volume. He says a lot of things without particularly thinking them out, just out of the pure emotion. And Elias sits back sometimes and thinks, what an idiot. Because Elias is a careful, thoughtful, like when he says something, it's curated. Whereas JT just spouts, and Elias sits back and goes like, okay. There he is going off again. That's how it was described to me. Greta, great spot for all the games, home and away. Let's get into the menu here. Big show coming up. We'll do some Canucks Army viewing parties there later. Minutes from the arena, steps from the stadium, pregame, postgame, fantastic spot. The street food menu, the smash burgers to die for, and the awesome arcade. The encircles the bar. Check out the air hockey. Weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. Huge show coming up here. Darren Dreger on all of these matters. We ask him, look, if you think it comes down to it, Miller or Pettersson, who do you think management and the coaching staff would choose? We'll talk to John Shannon. And Stephen Brunt joins us on the eve of launching a new limited edition podcast series here with our friends at the Nation Network called Up Close with Stephen Brunt, his return here to media after departing Rogers. Of course, once upon a time, a weekly regular with us.
We got Merrick, got Stephen Brunt on the Nation Network.
Exactly. Good deal. So congrats to Steve, and we talked to him about sort of the Canadian sports landscape these days, including soccer, where you have both national teams as successful as they've ever been, with all sorts of good tidings from fans. You don't necessarily have the same environment with Canada Soccer and the two teams themselves. And, of course, at the professional ranks with what's now going on with the Whitecaps, which we'll talk about later in the program as well. Bet365, bet of the day. This segment proudly brought to you by Bet365, partner here with Sekeres Price.
I was not a winner. Blake, I was not a winner. Not at all.
I wasn't either, because the Indianapolis Colts, despite being in that ballgame, just blew it with Denver. I like taking 7.5 points as opposed to laying. I don't have a ton of faith in my Bears in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is they've lost 3 games this year, 2 on blocked field goals, 1 on a Hail Mary. I do think they're going to bounce back from what was a dreadful effort last week. They played Minnesota close already once this year. And I'm going to bet my lot here with Caleb having a night and keeping the game close. So Bears +7 on Monday Night Football against the Vikings.
I'm going to do you better. I was sucking up to you today. I want the Vikings to look terrible before they face the Seahawks. So I'm going to have them come off a stinker versus the Seahawks. The Bears on the money line.
Oh, my God.
+265.
Now I know they're going to lose.
I don't need no stinking
sure
points.
Wow, do I seem cowardly in comparison? Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. You just don't follow the Bears as closely as
No, it's true. Yeah.
So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Darren Dreger is next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere, and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
Secure some price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss, proudly Canadian-owned, operated with a history dating back more than 100 years. 5 locations here in BC: Abbotsford, Victoria, Chilliwack, Willowbrook, and Langley. Coquitlam Center, committed to customer satisfaction. They got a large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. Available mine diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. As we welcome in TSN Hockey Insider and one half of the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast, Mr. Darren Dreger. Very spicy weekend for the Vancouver Canucks. How are you?
Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm. I'm doing okay. I mean, yeah, tempers are running a little high. Emotions are up there as well. And, you know, that goes hand in hand when you've got inconsistency in your game and you've got the roster freeze, which is looming now imminently, you know, late on Wednesday night. So there are a lot of factors that are in play, but there's some teams that we're watching very, very closely in the insider business. And I wouldn't say Vancouver is right at the top of the list. I think that's that's a bit of an exaggeration. But given the comments that we heard from both Rick Tocchet and then the president of the club, Jimmy Rutherford, this weekend, yeah, it's a team.
They're closer to the top than we'd expected, right?
Yeah, well,
in terms of panic.
The thing is, for a team of the winning, like, obviously there's Buffaloes of the world, Anaheims of the world, the Rangers of the world, but, you know, the Canucks...
Again, remember, the Rangers started to melt down and have all these sorts of vibes when they were 12-7-1, I think.
Yeah.
So, like...
Yeah. So Dregs Tocchet says he's not happy. He says some players are not emotionally invested. How concerned is he, and do you know with whom specifically he is concerned?
Well, I think we can see it, Matt, in some of the play or the inconsistency of the players who you rely on most. You know, it's difficult to identify individual players, and the coach certainly isn't going to do that. Frankly, that's just the honesty of Rick Tocchet. I was a bit surprised that he took it to that point in answering the question the way that he did, to not only question the emotional commitment or investment of certain players, but he went on to say, look, to play in the National Hockey League, you've got to invest. You've got to commit. And I doubt very much that he's talking about fourth line guys or depth defense. So, yeah, I think you look at the players that he needs to lead. And whether that's, you know, Elias Pettersson, who for me, from an outsider perspective, appears to be more good than bad. Maybe there's been some inconsistency of late that's crept into his game. Brock Boeser is one for sure that I think that we could put a check mark beside. Höglander, I mean, go down the list, right? And it is unfair to guess or to categorize. And what I would know is that, knowing Rick Tocchet the way I do, just to take it as far as he did and answering as honestly and as bluntly as he did, you can be darn sure that he's had that face-to-face conversation with the 4 or 5 guys or more that he is identifying. So I think we're just going to have to leave it to the coaching staff to show us in whatever fashion they can as to who specifically they're most concerned with.
Do you think he's already gone to management with his wish list in terms of what's needed?
Yeah, I think Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff, by and large, would have gone to management prior to the start of the year. And sure, you have revisiting conversations because you're in the season, and as the old cliche goes in the Cap world, you better like your team in the off season, because trying to change it in season on the fly without doing just some basic tinkering is really difficult to do. It feels like we've been talking about the need for top 4, top 5 defensemen in Vancouver dating back to the offseason last year. Likewise for a piece up front, winger, center, they'll take what they get, but that's got to be a player of some influence, a player of some impact. So I would think that that's what Tocchet is continually driving home to have Patrick Allvin. And look, their relationship is top notch. It really is. I mean, as they should. Coach and general manager communicate all the time. And maybe sometimes your needs shift a little bit, and maybe more the sense of urgency shifts a little bit as well, as does, by the way, the players who could be in player, the players that are available. That maybe you didn't love the idea of this player a month ago, but now all of a sudden you're looking at change for the sake of making change. And I don't know that that's where Vancouver is. But I don't think there's any question that Rick Tocchet has made his feelings well known in a positive way as to what he thinks this group needs.
May not be where they are, but they are near that neighborhood. They are driving closer to that. And what you're saying is true about tweaking your team in the season. Except this is Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, who have a bit of a reputation for this. We used to joke about Kevin Cheveldayoff not trading for a human being in 4 years, sort of thing. That's not this group. These guys tweak. You mentioned the roster freeze.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. It's a real thing. But is it a pressure point for anybody? It's not that long. It's not like it's a 4-week freeze. So, does it really impact how managers are thinking, do you think?
Not really. And, unless you're a team that has cap issues and you're getting healthier. And by the time you come out of the roster freeze, maybe there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Sure. I guess, and I know we're going to get there. I think of the Buffalo Sabres. There's a team that hasn't won in 10 games. Kevin Adams is feeling the heat. And reportedly, his owner, Terry Bagula, fresh off an impressive Buffalo Bills win, is now shifted his focus from the National Football League to the NHL team, the other team he has as an owner, and is going to visit them on the road to probably find out what the heck is going on, or maybe something more significant. I can't be sure of that. That's a bit weird. It's a bit strange that he would go to those lengths. So I would look, if there's a team out there, the New York Rangers, they haven't done enough. They're still kind of way behind the 8 ball here, but they've done some stuff already, clearly. So if there's another team that I'd be keeping a close eye on, for sure, it's Buffalo. But I dealt directly with Kevin Adams yesterday. We had the regional Maple Leafs Buffalo Sabres game Sunday afternoon. And we know a week plus ago, Adams addressed his local media, said, look, I'm not making a dumb move. I'm not making a panic move. If there's something available right now that is going to help this team, sure. Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I checked in with him late last week, checked in with him again yesterday pregame, and he said, no, it's status quo for me. I'm in the same situation. But then, fellas, I watched that game, did that game. Beautiful start by the Sabres. They get out to a 2-0 lead. You've got fresh bodies in the lineup. Jack Quinn, weirdly, had been a healthy scratch for 5 consecutive games. Pop, he's got 2 goals. And you're looking at the Sabres going, finally. They're going to find a way to squeak one out in tough territory in Toronto. And then the second period collapses, and they can't pull it out of the fire. And here we are now talking about the desperation in Buffalo, and what more can this general manager do? So I'm sure Kevin Adams is a popular guy with the freeze looming, with every general manager, including Patrick Allvin, out there on line one saying, we can help you out, Kevin. Just give us the word.
So when he says, okay, so he's not going to make a dumb trade, a rash trade, what have you. But when he makes a trade, do you suspect it will be pieces that you could consider or could have considered part of the Sabres core? Yeah, like the Byram Cousins level players.
No, well, not unless somebody blows them out of the water. And just to revisit some morning speculation from a high-ranking source, I'm told that there's nothing going on between Vancouver and Buffalo. So we'll see if that, plays out. If something changes with a phone call, you always have to qualify when you're, again, trying to manage what could be a desperate situation. But no, I mean, if you watch the Sabres at all, you can appreciate why a lot of teams would be calling on Bo Byram. I remember having a conversation with you guys a number of weeks ago and wondering whether or not there might be an opportunity for Bo Byram, who contractually would be real attractive, not just based on his game, but look, the way things have gone in Buffalo, does he want to stay long-term? Probably not. So there'll be a lot of teams circling around there. Dylan Cousins in that game late last night, I can't remember which goal it was, whether it was the Tavares 4-3 goal. He was steamed. He was hot. You can just tell those players are wearing it. Their hearts are showing here. But I think, honestly, fellas, that's also part of the problem that Kevin Adams is dealing with. He's trying to evaluate how small the core of Buffalo is, including some of these young developing potential stars, or how big it is. And that's a predicament, right? Because our core players available? Well, let's see. If they lose 15 in a row, maybe everyone's on the block.
Marcus Pettersson is injured now, says Steve Sullivan, week to week. Does that mean he is off the block for that time, or does the price just go down because you're trading for an injured player? How do you perceive that will go down?
You know what? It depends, I guess, on what week to week means. If week to week drifts into month to month, well, then we're having a different conversation, perhaps 4 weeks from now. So we'll have to wait to identify what the exact severity of that injury is. And I'm always reminded, we just talked about Buffalo. If you could trade Jack Eichel the way the Sabres did to the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, granted, that was a conversation between Kelly McCrimmon and Kevin Adams that probably took months before they finally pulled the trigger on that one. And we know that it was a bit of an exploratory surgery, a bit of a gamble to repair the work that was needed done to the neck of Jack Eichel. But I'm always reminded, when you can trade a guy like that, who had $10 million per on his contract, even though Vegas saw what we see now and that he is a superstar, then you can trade an injured player. It's just that simple. It just depends on, again, the severity and how deep the team that's inquiring wants to dive into the medical records to prove that this isn't going to be a long-term or something that is going to take him out, beyond the next several weeks. So to be determined, but it doesn't help Kyle Dubas, I can assure you of that.
Rutherford says they're a couple of pieces away. Do you know what pieces he's referring to? Do you know if they have targeted players?
Oh, I'm sure they have, but the office that contains that whiteboard with those names on it is locked tight. We're not getting inside there. I can be specific to saying top 4 defense and now a winger. And for a good chunk of this year, they felt like it was probably going to be a centerman, like a 3C, but that want has shifted now to a winger. So, they'll continue to do their work. They'll continue to make the calls. And like we're reminded, and we've already touched on in this segment, those two guys work really, really hard in Patrick Allvin and Jimmy Rutherford. And when one of these teams, whether it's Buffalo, it's Nashville, it's another team that is struggling and just wants to kind of get ahead, as soon as one of those teams blinks. And look, I don't know if you guys caught the Billy Guerin interview that we did on Ray and Dregs. Was it last week? Yeah, I believe it was. He talked about learning something very important during his days with Jimmy in Pittsburgh. And it wasn't to jump in early. I mean, that's already been established historically. It is to make sure that it's a fair deal for both teams. And it's interesting because when you approach it that way, then you get a lot more people coming to the dance because they don't feel like your main objective is to fleece them in a trade. No, you've got some pieces that you're okay with, but maybe they're underachieving, you don't love. Maybe you feel they need a change of scenery. And then you've got a David Jiricek who was in Columbus who couldn't make their lineup. Billy Guerin gives a boatload for to acquire, and now he's in Minnesota. So he learned that from Jimmy. So you could see change for the sake of change. So I'm sure there are a number of names on that whiteboard.
Look, it's been 2 games since Miller and Pettersson have been back in the lineup together. Some are drawing the line that, lo and behold, Elias goes pointless as soon as JT Miller comes back.
He's got 3 points.
Low ice totals, all that. Darren, if it ever came down to Miller or Pettersson and somebody has to go from this franchise,
Oh, boy.
is your sense that this management group would cast its lot and coaching staff would cast its lot with JT?
Well, it would only be, this would only be my speculation because I don't want to make it sound like I've talked to either side about this.
Fair enough.
I would say that as long as Rick Tocchet is head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and this isn't a slight on Elias Pettersson, it's just we know the type of players that Rick Tocchet gravitates to, and certainly JT Miller would fit more of the style of play that Rick Tocchet feels you can win with. And I'm not talking about winning regular season games. I'm talking about getting into that battle, a guy who will drag other players into that fight. That's JT Miller. When he's healthy, you guys have seen this game when it's at the top. And then, more recently, I'm not talking about the last few games prior to the leave of absence. For a number of reasons, it wasn't quite there. But it's not a knock on Pettersson at all. It really isn't. It's the style of player. I could ask the same thing of John Tortorella in Philadelphia. I could ask the same of Craig Berube in Toronto. The mold of that coach, if they could design a perfect player, it would be more of a hard-nosed energy, guy who, again, is willing to take you into the fight every single shift.
Lastly, Dregs, we did see a top 4. Might just be hanging on as the top 4, but we saw a trade of a top 4 defenseman on the weekend with Cam Fowler heading to St. Louis from Anaheim. He had a 4-team trade list, not excluding 4 teams, only 4 teams that he could be dealt to. Were the Canucks any possibility there? What's your understanding?
Okay. No. Now, I don't know that Patrick Galvin didn't make a call, but I do know that Pettersson, who represents Cam Fowler, told Pat Verbeek that if he had other teams inquiring, that he should let them know. And that's not to say that Cam would have expanded that list, but if you've got something out there that's of interest, that you want us to consider, then just let it be known. And if it's a fit, we'd consider that. And I think that was Cam Fowler wanting to do right by the Anaheim Ducks. And I was told that Vancouver was not among them. And in fact, I don't think that there was another team that was presented beyond the teams that Cam Fowler was willing to go to.
Hey, before you go, one last one just on a temperature check. Because the Flames start has had people say, "Oh, don't swirl around, don't have the vultures around the Flames just yet," because they're playing okay, and they're still okay record wise. Yeah, but there's been some cracks. They've only got 3 wins in their last 10 games. Are they still standing pat here? Are they going to be still really patient here and see what the new year brings?
Yeah, really patient is the right way to describe it, Blake. But I do think that we then have to follow that up with to be determined, right? No different than if they had maintained their fast-paced start, and now all of a sudden you go into the new year and you're looking at February and you're a team that's challenging for the division. Okay, well, maybe there's an opportunity to bolster that lineup. Not give away young assets, but just give that group a little bit of help, almost as a reward. As you approach February, go into March, the trade deadline, and then you get ready for that final push. So it's the two things are kind of similar in that regard. I don't get any sense in dealing with the Calgary Flames that there's an impatience there. I think that they felt like they would come back down to earth. But I think that they're going to monitor the situation moving forward as well. They're a good team. Their goaltending, I think, was carrying them through a lot and covered up some holes that they had on the back end, and that allowed the forwards to chip in where they could. But again, I think it's a wait and see for Craig Conroy and the Calgary Flames. They still like their team. I don't see a fire sale sign going up anytime soon, if at all. But if the right opportunity presents, then maybe he does dabble at least a little bit.
Amazing stuff, Dregs. Thank you for the time here today, and we'll catch up down the road here.
Okay, guys, have a good week.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Seahawks and Price from the Historic Wall Center, joined now by John Shannon, the new pod, 100% Hockey, with Darren Millard, of course, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia. How are you?
Happy Monday, boys.
Mm-hmm.
Back at you.
So going to ask you our poll question, our Siri Mitsubishi poll question. Is it inevitable that one of JT Miller or Elias Pettersson has to be traded here, John? Can you see these two coexisting, or is it an inevitability that the Canucks are going to have to cast their lot with one of them?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think that they'll find a way to make this work between the two of them. If in fact there are as major issues as people are alleging at this point. But you guys have all been in dressing rooms. You've all been around clubs. Not everybody's bosom buddies. Not everybody's friends all the time. Some of the best teams in professional sports have had anger management issues. Let's put it that way. But I think this is really too much about nothing. If they play together, that's one thing. But if they're on separate lines, and even if they play together, I mean, the game is so different when you do or don't have the puck. I mean, if the Canucks think that they're going to have to go one way or the other, I just don't see that. I really don't. I think that there's room for both. The Canucks need both. I think that's a better story is, the Canucks need both guys to be, working on all cylinders, and hopefully that day is going to come one day.
Did you foresee a time this season when Rick Tocchet, on multiple occasions now, will be calling out the best players on his team, as we saw this weekend?
No, I didn't. I think there's a real genuine frustration with the coaching staff, with management, that there were lessons to be learned by going 2 rounds in the playoffs, and the players haven't learned those lessons, Blake. And I think that's actually one of the big frustrations with the organization right now, is that, we always talk about this on a constant basis. We just need playoff experience. We need to go deep in the playoffs. Then we need to understand what price you pay. Well, you learn what price to pay, and then you perform better. What appears to have happened, and what is being said is our guys, hopefully learned what price to pay, and they thought it would get easier. And it's not easier, it's tougher, but you have to be committed to it. And that, I think, is the biggest aspect of this that is driving people within the organization nuts.
The optics of Elias Pettersson aren't great on a night-to-night basis, but the stats don't necessarily support that. And so it's a difficult nut to crack here in that he's not sewering you. It's just he admittedly is not necessarily putting the team on his back, as the coach says, like the guys at Edmonton can do. Is that even a fair comparison, though, to make?
No, it's not. I mean, I remember in the first year or so of Pettersson's career, I made comparisons to some of the aspects of the way he played the game to McDavid and to Gretzky, and people thought I had 5 heads. So I'm going to say that it's difficult to compare what McDavid and Draisaitl do on a constant basis. But then again, I think that McDavid and Draisaitl learned a ton from those 4 rounds of playoffs last year. And I think that that's a key aspect. The biggest challenge for Elias Pettersson, in my opinion, is that, and this is why I think there's a schism with some of the fan base, is that it appears that he doesn't care as much as JT Miller. Miller wears it on his sleeve. Miller lives this. He dies this. And Elias Pettersson just chugs along. But that's That's DNA. That's societal, where people come from, how they interact. So I don't think it's fair to Pettersson. I really don't. And I tell you what, I am, and I don't think the organization is anywhere near to giving up on it.
If the day did come, and I know you reject the premise, who do you think management and the coaching staff would cut their lot with, JT or Elias?
I will reiterate, I don't think the day will come.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. Stick to your guns.
It's just, I think that both of them have great attributes that this organization can build around. And I rue the day that even is considered by many. So I'm not answering, Matt. I'm not taking the fifth.
Yeah, I see that your Oliver is showing, sir. Rutherford thinks they're 2 pieces away. That's what he told After Hours. Do you concur?
Well, do they need another top 6 forward? Do they need another defenseman?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I think every team in the league needs a top 6 forward, and every team in the league needs another defenseman. What I'd be more concerned about right now is how quickly Thatcher Demko can get into game shape. The first game he played was impressive. I think that the last game he played, you said, "Oh, he's starting to look tired already." And then you have to say, "Well, you know what? He's just not ready yet." But he needs those games. You're not going to get it in practice. You need those games, and that's when you need team defense to take over and help your starting goaltender.
How do you Jimmy? How would he react to the coach saying what he's saying, to the players acting as they have, the JT Miller saga with him leaving the team? Get inside his brain if you can. What do you speculate he might be thinking about this team and about the need to make changes more specifically? Because this has been an odd year. This has been a weird year with a lot of plot twists. This is like a Netflix soap right now, it feels like, here in the NHL.
Yeah, and I think he's trying to pat down a lot of that soap opera level. I think he understood exactly what JT Miller was going through, hence the support for Miller that he gave. I would suggest that I don't think Rick Tocchet says anything that hasn't been discussed before with management, and that they are in lockstep. That they are together. They believe in each other. They understand each other. Rick Tocchet doesn't get this job without full buy-in, and the other way around. Rick Tocchet doesn't buy in without Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin. So I don't think that that's an issue. I do think the fulcrum, I do think the issue is where the players are in all of this when it comes to understanding what price you pay. What price you pay to play the game. Adam Foote, the coach, knows what price to pay. He's won his name is on the Stanley Cup. Rick Tocchet's name's on the Stanley Cup. They know what price to pay. Do the players. And I think that at times can be very frustrating for everybody that isn't in that dressing room.
Rutherford said with the home record, if that continues, they're not a playoff team. 4 at home, John. They're sitting on the last playoff spot right now. Big one against Colorado's in the other wild card spot here tonight. Calgary on the same number of points, albeit with 2 extra games in hand. What do you think? Are you at all worried about Vancouver Canucks as a playoff team right now?
I'm not, but I understand what is said when we're not a playoff team. When you can't win at home, I mean, the options are miss the playoffs, or in this case, lose in 4 straight. I can't believe we're talking about losing in 4 straight in December, but if home is supposed to be where you're better. This whole concept of being one of the best road teams and one of the worst home teams is such a dichotomy for me that I don't really understand it, and I don't think people with the hockey club too understand it. So from that perspective, they do have to get better at home. They do. The question is why are they playing this way? Are they trying too hard? Are they trying to impress? Are they the simplicity of being on the road? because there is as you guys know, living life on the road in so many ways is simpler. Hotel, arena, bus, airplane. That's it. Well, the distractions of home in a very, very intense hockey market is one that you have to understand that it's taking a toll. And how do you manage that? And I think that that's something that's probably a really important discussion between players and coaches, between management and players as well.
Thatcher Demko's had 2 tough outings, thanks to the team in front of him. That's unideal, I would think, in his comeback here. And yet he got to see a lot of different scenarios over the course of these 2 games, and he seems to have passed them physically, which I guess is the silver lining here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I must admit there were a couple of times on Saturday against the Bruins that he went down, and I started to worry.
Yeah, right.
I said, "Ooh, how is the populatitis or whatever it's called? How is that doing today?" And so yes, but that's what I was talking about. Like, that's the type of thing you can only do in a game. You can't do that at practice. So, to get him these opportunities, and now understand that it's not panic. You can put Kevin Lankinen in and be 100% confident of what's going on is really important for this hockey club right now. So from that perspective, just stay the course on whatever the plan was for Demko, that he's going to play every second game or every third game, and get him back by the new year into a place where you're saying, okay, now we have Thatcher Demko where he needs to be to lead us to the playoffs and particularly win some home games.
I know you go down to Buffalo from time to time. Some cross-border shopping, some visiting with friends. Is Buffalo primed to be fleeced right now? Pegula's apparently making the trip to Montreal today to talk to Kevin Adams and the Sabres after his football team has a magnificent win, and he's at the NFL meetings. Is Buffalo in a spot where you think they may do something big, something potentially rash, just because of all the losing and because they would like to get back in this playoff race in the East, a la the Ottawa Senators and some of the other teams that have forever see themselves looking up at the Eastern Conference playoff bar?
The question becomes, who's responsible for the Sabres losing 10 games, either in overtime or shootout or regulation? Who's in charge of that? Lindy has taken full responsibility for it. Lindy Ruff's a good coach. Lindy Ruff was the owner's choice to coach. To me, the onus right now falls on the guy who's constructed this team, and that's Kevin Adams. And not often, because usually we blame the players. No, we blame the coach first, then we blame the players, and then we blame the manager. Well, we've got to stop that. There are a couple of situations in the National Hockey League, Buffalo being one, and I think the Rangers being the other, that I think you have to point the finger directly at the manager, not at the coach or the players, to change something. The other aspect of this is that, I know Devin Levi played last night in Toronto, and he was pretty good, but UPL has not been what he was last year. And that's a big factor. He had a great second half of the season. Maybe they're hoping that, the calendar turns and UPL is better. Their young defenseman, Dahlin, who's been hurt. Owen Power has been inconsistent. That's a huge issue for a lot of people. And there's so many inconsistencies amongst the forwards. So the answer is, I don't know what the owner's going to Montreal for. I don't think, if Terry's going there to have a long discussion with Lindy and Kevin Adams, then so be it. But I don't think Terry Pegula has any idea of what the players are going through and what the players are doing right or wrong. Because I think a lot of people liked where this team was when the season started, and the bodies that they had, and the Dylan Cousins of the world were going to have breakout years, and the truth is they just haven't. Mm-hmm. Tage Thompson has not had a year like he had previously. So there are still some major issues of personnel in Buffalo, But in my mind, that falls right on Kevin Adams.
Yeah, well, and I'm just wondering whether in an attempt to save his bacon, he's going to make a move here, John. Like, are we going to see a Bowen Byram trade? Are we going to see Jack Quinn or Dylan Cousins or some of the guys who haven't been working out as well this year get moved in short order to see if he can just change the balance, change the tone, the temper, the whatever of this club before the season is lost. If it's not lost already, I mean, you could argue it's lost already, although it's not exactly a high bar in the Eastern
it's a snail race.
It is. It's a turtle derby.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you what, I would be. Now, I've never owned an NHL team. I don't have deep enough pockets, but I do think I have a sense of what hockey teams are all about. I would be telling Kevin, you cannot make a major deal at this point unless you're going to get me an elite superstar player in return. Because by the way, the last time we got rid of our elite player, he went on to win the Stanley Cup, and we haven't done squat since.
Is Elias elite? John?
Yeah, does that mean qualification?
No.
Will you entertain that question?
Buffalo, no. I'm not entertaining the question yet. I'm still taking the fifth.
It's Christmas, and he won't play in my reindeer games, John Shannon. All right.
Old and stubborn. I'm old and stubborn.
I guess. I guess he lit a path with his nose. The rest of the reindeer followed. John, we don't have a show next Tuesday. It is Christmas Eve, so a Merry Christmas to you and the entirety of the Shannon family. Thank you for this, and we'll catch up in a couple of weeks.
Merry Christmas to everybody on the show and to everybody throughout the province. It's always good to talk hockey in British Columbia.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So, Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, our next guest, author, longtime Globe and Mail columnist, Sportsnet contributor, and launching a new 6-episode series, Stephen Brunt, called Up Close, and it debuts tomorrow, Tuesday, December 17th. And he joins us from his in Hamilton, Steve?
Yes,
You
sir.
home?
Yes, sir.
How are ya?
In the home office in the Hammer here. Yes, the piney office in Hamilton. It's very rustic here, as you well know.
You could tell us you were in the Muskokas, and we'd believe you with that backdrop.
Yeah. He's got a place in Newfoundland, too. He could tell us he's in a fishing lodge in Newfoundland. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great. It's good to see you guys. It's been a while.
Mm-hmm. It has. Too long.
Tell us about the new project.
Well, I'm kind of edging back into I'd kind of sort of half retired, I guess. I'm not sure what that means anymore, but after the Sportsnet gig, and but kind of got lured back into the business by some people I like working with very much, and a premise that I was really excited about. I didn't really want to get back into kind of day-to-day sports stuff. I'd done that for a long time. I've done daily radio for a long time. And Matty, I wrote the column for years, like 4 a week. So I didn't really want to get back into who won, who lost stuff. But they offered me an opportunity to sit down and do interviews with people who I thought, who would interest me, long form kind of, and I'd enjoyed doing that kind of work as part of my Sportsnet gig, the long form interviews with people who, in all kinds of different parts of the business, but who have something to say. So I kind of choose my own, my own turf and my own format, and it's been a blast. Yeah, it's fun being back on the horse again.
The fact that you are not too preoccupied with wins and losses means you're going to be interviewing what kind of people do you think for this podcast?
Well, it's a mixed bag. Like obviously there will be some athletes, coaches, executive types, people who, kind of in all parts of it. Like really,
yeah.
I know. I used to work with a guy who would never wanted to interview athletes because he said they didn't have anything to say, and
yes,
he wasn't.
We know
he wasn't
who you're talking about.
he wasn't always wrong.
No.
But it's. I kind of it's interesting to talk to the people sometimes who kind of pull the strings too, right? Who actually kind of control the machineries of sport, whether that's teams or leagues or media, sports media. there's, I think people, sports fans, look, we all focus on the games and, your favorite team and all of those things. But I think fandom has changed. I think people really are very aware of kind of the business of the game. The people behind the curtain, the various Wizards of Oz behind the curtain. And it kind of explains, it's good to kind of understand why things are happening the way they're happening.
What do you think of the state of the industry now? And I mean sports in totality, because sports media we can parcel off here in a moment. But
that's a much more dark and dour conversation.
Exactly. We will talk about that, though, yeah.
But just, how it's covered, why it's covered the way that it is, and why the leagues want it that way, in-house media. It's been a weird 5 years covering sports in Canada. I mean that not only just from the media perspective, I mean what the sports actually want out of themselves.
Yeah, it has been a very weird 5 years. Like if you want to go, just pre-pandemic, right? Because the pandemic changed a ton of things. Obviously it changed the world in a lot of ways, but it changed our business tremendously. It changed the radio part of our business especially, and changed the way we produce stuff. The networks produce stuff. They're far more likely to do stuff like we're doing now. The idea of using other platforms to connect, which is great in a lot of ways. You can do things where where you couldn't send a camera crew across the country. So it's changed it on a technological basis. There's been this convergence too. Like I think we're in a world where there are going to be kind of a handful of kind of massive pillars, who are going to be controlling everything, whether that's the National Football League or whether that's the streaming services. We'll see where that goes. Or whether that's companies like, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment in Toronto, which is going to be run by one company and one guy and control, arguably the largest single sports business empire in North America. And the flip side of it is you have all kinds of, startups, on the media side, you can enter into the means of production are available to people if you've got a laptop, if you've got the internet. So there's all kinds of kind of independent media. And then the third part of it is the conventional media, where all of us worked, are in a huge kind of struggle to survive. You're right. Like leagues creating their own content, teams creating their own content, cutting out the middleman, not worrying about who covers them, because why would they? And the people who cover them have fewer and fewer resources to actually do the covering. So, reporters don't go on the road anymore and sit in the press box with the team. They don't necessarily go even to the big events, the Super Bowl or the Grey Cup or the World Series or the Olympics. So the idea of kind of in-house content creation, has become, that's certainly where things are trending. Of course, it's not independent. So
no,
if you're a fan, no one's pretending, but if it's coming from MLB.com or NHL.com or from your favorite team's content shop, you know what it is.
It's a damn shame too, Brunt, because we had many a good meal on the road, even a couple of fishing junkets.
I miss it, man. I try not to get to be the nostalgia guy because it's boring to people who are not as old as me. But right, we lived through the salad days for sure.
Yeah, one of the conversations we used to have when you and I were back at the Globe is Canada. Hockey. Johnny One notes, does hockey cannibalize interest in other sports? Theoretically, social media and the internet should provide portals, to go out, explore, and enjoy other leagues, other sports. Where are we at as a sports country right now, you think?
Well, we're coming up to, there's 2 years left in the Rogers hockey deal. Let's start with because there's an interesting kind of a measure for it, right? So, and I was inside at Sportsnet when that deal was done. And, the premise of that deal and the premise of all the money they paid for exclusivity was that they could grow the hockey audience, that there were people who in Canada who were not watching hockey, who they could get to watch hockey by being, hipper or slicker or different or not as stodgy as the old Hockey Night in Canada was. And if you look at those numbers, they're flat. When the Oilers get to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final, you get a tune-in. If the Leafs were ever to make a deep playoff run, you'd get casuals tuning in. To a lesser degree, you get that with the other Canadian teams if they make a deep playoff run. But the hockey audience is pretty flat. And what's changed in this country? The NFL, number one. Like look at those TV numbers. They're astounding. From we used to kind of talk about the CFL, NFL, maybe parity, or even the NFL doing a little less than the CFL, and the Grey Cup was the biggest sporting event on TV every year. It's not close now. The Super Bowl does what, 3 times the Grey Cup rating now? So massive growth there. Massive growth in soccer, although, started at a lower place, but World Cup, Euros, Premier League, although it's harder to access in Canada now than it was, you have to pay for a streaming service. So that's been a big sea change. The last couple of years, the women's team sports, although, we'll see where that goes. I've been through that a couple of times in my working life, and but I think it looks like that's real, that there's been a bit of a sea change there. So, yeah, I think, and the Blue Jays still, game to game, 162, draw very solid audiences because they're that rare national property. The Raptors sort of when they're winning, but it's not the same. So, yeah, I think it's changed a lot, and hockey has it's kind of static, that's why I'm intrigued by see what this next hockey deal looks like and who's going to pay for it.
I understand the growth of soccer because we were underexposed a little bit in North America for a long time for European soccer and everything like that. Why? And I feel like the NFL has even made inroads in their own country, for heaven's sakes. Is it just gambling? Is that what it's all about? Because the product has not improved greatly. Like the product it's always been a good product, but I don't know that they've reinvented any wheel to become a better league than they ever have been.
Yeah, I don't think it's just gambling, Blake. Look, obviously gambling's a factor, and gambling is now above the table. There was always gambling, but part of it is that they've colonized much more of the week than they used to have. They own a lot more turf than they used to. I think the product is spectacular. Again, I know football is not everybody's cup of tea, and the NFL is not everybody's jam. I get that, but I think it's great television, and it's kind of immersive. Right, it allows you to just kind of wallow in it. It comes at you, and you can sit there for hours and hours and hours. I'm pleading guilty here to a degree. It doesn't require. You have to invest in sports like baseball. To make it interesting, you really do kind of have to think through the game because it's not spectacular. Stuff doesn't happen all the time. Hockey is still on television. Is still you kind of have to know hockey. I think in a lot of ways to appreciate hockey on TV. But the NFL, the spectacle, the violence, the gambling, the quality of the broadcasts, the amount of turf, I say, from Labor Day to the middle of February, and that's not counting like the combine and the draft and all this other stuff. It's almost a 12-month proposition now.
It's a great TV show. You're right.
Well, and how we talk about colonizing other days of the week. They basically have told the NBA no more Christmas Day for you. Well, look what they're asking Houston, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore to do here. You play Sunday. They just played this Sunday. They're playing Saturday. They're coming back Wednesday, Christmas Day, so that they can own Christmas Day. So it's 3 games in 10 days, like when Sunday, Thursday is usually bad enough.
Goodness, huh?
So it's remarkable. I know you're a big footy guy.
Mm-hmm.
We got the 2026 World Cup coming up here, Steve. Like, it should be a celebration of soccer. It should be an event that creates a whole lot of soccer fans. And yet, our MLS team is up for sale now as of Friday. I'm sure you caught that news. There are whispers of relocation, and I'm not sure TFC has ever been in lower standing in the city of Toronto, but you tell me the professional soccer loop and its overlap, or is it completely separate and distinct from what's coming here in 2026?
No.
What's your sense there?
I think in terms of kind of the culture of the game and the fandom of the game, I think it all does kind of link together on a certain level. I think the Canadian Premier League does too, right? At a different space, but I think they've actually put a pretty good product on the field and kind of understood the scale that they're operating on, the very hyper local scale that they're operating on. So you've got that, plus the MLS, plus the new women's league that's coming, plus the men's and women's national teams, and then you kind of go into the global part of the game. The MLS thing is, the one thing I don't understand about, there's many things I don't understand, but one thing I don't understand are MLS franchise values. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand, because, you know, it's not a great TV property at all, right? It's completely local, regional in terms of television. I don't think, you know, you don't get a mass audience for the MLS Cup. And, you know, if you're a Toronto FC fan, and I'm sure this applies to Vancouver as well, you know the guys on your own team, you might know a rival team, but you don't really, like, I don't know how many people actually follow the league. Like, I don't know anybody that really follows the league. But those franchise values have gone crazy. And it feels to me, you know, it does feel like a bit of a, I don't know, Ponzi scheme. Not accusing anybody of anything, but, you know, which is what's happening with with Kerfoot in Vancouver, right? That team's on the free market is worth an enormous amount of money. And again, I don't understand the money in, money out part of that. But, you know, you need your own stadium, you need your own soccer specific stadium, you need your own training facility. You know, there's all kinds of other elements to it. And it's going to be tough for anybody in Vancouver. You know, you're not going to get your own stadium, or, you know, it's very unlikely. You know, controlling the revenues within the stadium you use is not really an option. Look, TFC, they're going to build a training complex here. I think it's going to be attached to they're going to have the national team training complex in Toronto, it looks like. They are a tiny element in this massive other company. On the pitch, they've been an absolute disaster. The Insigne signing, you know, I've never seen a guy look less like he gives a crap than Lorenzo Insigne. But, you know, I think they'll survive. And they've got a great stadium deal. Like, the city built the stadium, but they basically own the stadium and run it themselves. So they're going to be fine. And I think Montreal's going to be fine because of Saputo and the stadium and everything they have there. But it's a strange one, because it seems absolutely contradictory that you could lose a team at a time when, you know, soccer interest is at highest in history. The men's national team is really exciting. You're hosting co-hosting a World Cup. One thing seems to not add up with the others, but I think it's about the weird economics of MLS.
Yeah. Am I allowed to tell them who's your first guest here tomorrow?
Yes, you are.
Well, you were talking about the Wizards behind the curtain. It is MLSE president and CEO Keith Pelley, who, of course, once upon a time ran TSN, once upon a time ran Sportsnet, once upon a time produced NFL games on Fox, and then went ahead and ran the European Golf Tour for a number of years during a particularly interesting time in golf.
Kind of tried to reinvent the wheel over there a little bit.
Business. Yeah. So that drops tomorrow, and it's a 6-part series, and I'm sure you'll be letting us know who else you got coming up close with Stephen Brunt, beginning tomorrow on the Nation Network. Great catching up, my friend. Great seeing your face, hearing your voice again. Wish you the best of luck with this. We're here to help and support, and catch up down the road.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good seeing both of you, and nice to be on the same team. It's been,
it's been a while.
Happy working with you guys.
Yeah, it used to be a weekly regular on our show, Steve. way back.
I remember.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen.
See you guys.
Sick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. You can text us 778-402-9680. Email live at sickharrisonprice.com. It all goes to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
We'll have a Great Clips to the people we go on Friday. Okay, more on the sale of Vancouver Whitecaps FC. So the current ownership group is committed through 2025, and, you know, with the training camp a month or so away, that needed to be the case.
It's going to be a long search, so it stands to reason. Yeah.
Well, is it?
I would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keeping the club here is a priority, but not a necessity. Now, I have seen people speculate about, on the relocation file, would MLS want that given the expansion fees that they could request in some of these other markets? Now, we've seen this in the NHL. Could it take the form of a relocation fee? Maybe, but that's probably less lucrative for the league,
for sure.
And more expensive for the buyer. Tom Bogert, the MLS Insider, was on Galazzo America this weekend, and he reported that there's discontent around the league about the Whitecaps' relevance in the league. Being an outlier that doesn't own its stadium, doesn't own its training facility, has not been amongst the top spenders. He talked about how they wound up getting $22 million for Alphonso Davies, didn't reinvest it in the team, at least not enough to build the team and its foothold in the market.
Didn't reinvest it in the roster of the first team.
Right.
Yes.
So he said there's no current relocation plans, but it depends on the new owner. And he said that people from around MLS are texting him saying they have to be moving. Right.
And Paul Dolan and I got those texts as well. Like 2 months ago, I'm saying there was scuttlebutt about Vancouver moving.
Axel said this has been in the works for as long as 4 or 5 months. So that's why when you say, like, is it going to take a while? Well, they're already 4 or 5 months into this. I don't know.
The MLS does not want to lose an Olympic city and a World Cup city from its league. So I'm
not so sure about that.
I am of both minds. Well, I don't think.
I think it's the easiest market for Don Garber to lop off.
Over Montreal, over Columbus.
In that it does not punch above its weight class in terms of league revenue, in terms of it doesn't own its stadium or a training facility, and I think that's the model that he wants to get to.
The key thing for them is that they have healthy ownership that is willing to sustain losses. That's the key thing. These markets are really gate-driven as it is. So as long as you're bringing in fans, and Vancouver was 7th in fans this year, you're going to look at that and go, boy, that's without a winning club? What does that market look like with wins?
Right.
And so that would be the temptation here for Don Garber. It's a World Cup city. And so, the club is not pulling out before the World Cup. Like, there's just no chance of that. And then you'd have to ask yourself, well, why would you pull out immediately after the World Cup? Why wouldn't you see what the World Cup does in terms of seeding soccer fans in the market? Even if you were a foreign ownership, even if you're going to draw the Vancouver Grizzlies comparison, let's say they find themselves a Bill Lowry type that buys the Vancouver Whitecaps. You don't have a soccer-specific stadium yourself, obviously, because there are no dormant soccer-specific stadiums in North America that are not being used. So you haven't built that yet, wherever you're from, Des Moines, Vegas, San Antonio. You still have to build that. Would you not be better off if you are that San Antonio owner? It's going, I would love it to be in San Antonio, but hey, if I can make it work there, let's see what this looks like over 4, 5, 6 years. And if it doesn't look any better after the World Cup's come and gone, after a couple of years after that, then I leave, then I pull up stakes and I leave. But this team, I'll go off on the long branch here, is not moving in the next 3 years minimum.
Okay. The Aquilini family has told Global BC they are not interested in acquiring the Whitecaps. I view that as potentially one of two ways. Number one, they're just not. They were scared off at $300+ million for the New Orleans Pelicans back in the day when they were kicking tires on an NBA team. Stands to reason they would be scared off by $400 million plus for an MLS team. That is, if the Caps could get that sort of ticket. The other thing might be we're not interested right now. Wait till the price goes down. Wait till the desperation hits. Particularly if you want to keep it in the market. If MLS wants to keep it in the market, then they might be there. As we know, the Aquilinis typically only do deals where they are instantaneously the benefactor, where it's advantageous to them from the jump.
That's right. And you can't stick them inside Rogers Arena. So there's an NBA team was a play, right, to create a bigger thing, a bigger package of Aquilini sports. You don't have that play here with the Whitecaps.
Well, you have a different play. You do have a play in terms of a sports empire, but it is a little different.
You've got expenses now that you
tenant.
don't. You have no expenses bringing an NBA team in.
Longtime Vancouver soccer journalist Simon Fudge saying, though speculation on my part, but worth considering, a nation state like Qatar, who own Paris Saint-Germain, or an ownership group of a European club looking to spread their wings might have interest. Peter Shadd on that latter point. I can also see how a globally ambitious club could view the Whitecaps' opportunity as an ideal turnkey solution to expand a global cooperation network. No new stadium or training center costs. the ability to offer their own academy graduates.
Yeah, I talked about this
A
on
pathway,
Friday.
yes,
A Red Bulls equation. You know, the Red Bulls have got teams in every continent. Other teams are doing that. Barcelona is starting to do that as well. You know, and so there's how many like crazy rich European clubs? 20? Something like that? Does any one of those 20 teams go, we don't have to invest in real estate by buying this team?
Yep.
We can just sort of plug and play. It's like having a rental, basically. You know, like
Are you ready to interview a Qatari emir as the new owner of
I mean,
Vancouver Whitecaps?
it may be that kind of owner may not be. So there are other European super teams that are non-Middle East owned.
And this, as they're searching for a new cap and coach, and does this coach for the Caps? Does this explain, Vanny, a little bit? Clear the decks for a new owner. If you could do a quick sale, you own your own coach, or do you think they're totally?
I think they're exclusive, and because I just don't. I think they have to hire a coach before they find the owner.
Of course, Schuster says 5 candidates there. One does wonder about recruiting coaches, players, executives here in this gray world of limbo, where ownership is going to be transferred. And hard journalists of Daily Hive reporting that this news drops as players and staff are in Scotland for Ryan Gauld's wedding. I imagine it was discussed.
Yeah. I mean,
over some haggis. And
again, it won't affect their immediate futures. And even the coach search, like really logistically, if you're a new coach and you're mulling over Vancouver, like how does that really affect you? Because if you come on and you do your job and you bring this team to higher heights, no one's getting rid of you.
Just that if an ownership group buys the team in a year, that like especially if it's a global brand team that has its own ideas, that views it more as a development club or whatnot, you might be out quickly.
But again, if you have brought this team to a higher station than they are currently in that 1 year interim, are they going to get rid of you?
Well, probably not, but first opportunity sort of thing. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what the new owner's aim and mission is here in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. Boy, really disappointing loss for the Seattle Seahawks on 3 fronts. Number one, you cede first place in the NFC West to the LA Rams. You are now on the outside looking in of the NFC playoff picture because 8-6 is not better than 9-5, which is what the Washington Commanders improved to yesterday with a controversial last-minute win against New Orleans. So Seattle would not be a wild card right now, would need to win some games and get some help to be a wild card. Secondly, it's disappointing because Geno Smith leaves this game with what looks to be a knee injury. Now, the reporting this morning from head coach Mike McDonald says he's suggesting there's optimism that he might be able to play here this coming weekend at home against the Minnesota Vikings. That's a Sunday 1 p.m. game. And then disappointing on the third front, just weren't in the game.
You weren't in the game.
I suppose you could say down 10 with 11 minutes to play, but really you weren't in this game. I mean, Green Bay came in and took your lunch money. They scored early. They scored often. Your much ballyhooed, revamped defense gave up a ton there.
But we had just praised them for their professional win the week previous.
Mm-hmm.
Like hey, that's called looking like you're ready for the playoffs.
Right.
And then they were sort of like the Canucks. Canucks beat the Stanley Cup champs to go 2-0 versus the Cup champs this year. And then they throw up that versus the Bruins. And the Seahawks kind of did the same thing in back-to-back games. Hey, we're ready. No, we're not. Although a lot of people are looking at Green Bay coming out of that game and going, holy hell, is Green Bay way better than we thought?
Green Bay's a damn good team.
Yeah.
I said at the beginning of the year, I really thought Green Bay and the Rams were excellent teams. They got off to slower starts, but they're coming.
Yeah.
And I cannot, for the life of me, this Seahawks team you went 2.5 years before you fixed the run defense, which is amongst the easiest things to fix. Interior offensive line from a personnel standpoint is kind of the same thing. I mean, yeah, it's harder to get those elite centers, but guards are, if they're not a dime a dozen, they're I cannot get over just how awful they are on the interior offensive line. Just how week after week guys who play there just get absolutely dominated by people in front of them. They give up 7 sacks last night.
7 sacks, and they don't get one themselves.
They get 12. They give up 12 hits on the quarterback. And you know, that's not the fearsome foursome or the purple people eaters or, you know, any of those great legendary defensive lines on the other side. I mean, there's some good players there.
They lose 45 yards on those sacks too. I mean, just a disaster.
So now got to get to the business of winning. You have Minnesota, as mentioned, at your place on Sunday. So
must win.
You're basically at must win here.
Yeah, it is.
And you're also staring down the LA Rams and going, boy, my next favorite team is whoever the Rams play. They're in New York to face the Jets.
Oh.
Although coming off a win.
The 4-10 now.
Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams turned the clock back yesterday. He had nearly 200 yards receiving, Devontae.
Still not a lot of faith there.
Not sure the Rams are going to have trouble at the Jets.
Who else they have after that?
The Rams?
Yeah, the Rams are hosting the Cardinals, and then, of course, the showdown with the Seahawks.
And then the Seahawks showdown. And really, the only way that game won't be consequential is if the Seahawks lose out here.
Right.
I don't think they're going to
Right,
lose.
even if they go 2-0,
yes,
it's going to mean something.
Because, of course, right now the Rams have the tiebreaker by virtue of the fact that they won the first meeting, but that doesn't have to be the case if the Seahawks wind up winning the second meeting in the regular season finale for both clubs. Kamloops' Sawyer Mineo has made the Canadian World Junior team. One of 2 British Columbians, alongside defenseman Tanner Molendijk, who's from McBride, on the 25-man roster, and it's an expanded roster. Nanaimo's Matthew Wood, Vancouver's Andrew Crystal did not make the team. They were among the cuts, and the Canucks will have, as many as 3 players at the World Juniors. You got Sawyer Mineo with Canada. You have Tom Wielander with Sweden. And we have high hopes, though the Swiss have not yet released their final roster, for Basil Sansonens.
I think he makes it. I've been doing a deep dive on
well,
the
he's
Swiss
one of the few
Swiss
NHL-affiliated drafted players. So he's a little younger because he was just drafted, but he also was good enough to be drafted in the 7th round, 222nd overall.
I was once sitting in a Buffalo Starbucks during the World Juniors.
Story time with Blake.
And unbeknownst to the 2 gentlemen beside me, who were representatives of I believe it was Denmark and Switzerland, their respective teams. And I heard them talking about it. And they basically were talking about their strategies about being competitive in that they very much, as you would expect for nations like this, they gear up. So they don't mind dressing young players,
right? Because
they're really thinking, hey, we're probably going to be crappy this year, but if I give this guy the experience this year, then next year we got 7, 18-year-olds graduating, we'll be in better shape for next year. So a guy like Basil Sansons, I think, gets the call because he becomes one of those seasoned guys for next year for Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Just turned 18 in August, too. So he's
a baby.
Yeah, he's a young 18.
Yeah.
Let's go Basil. And then lastly, congratulations to Victoria's Chelsea Green.
Is that the way they say it?
That's how Lillian Garcia, WWE ring announcer, says it. The inaugural U.S. women's title holder in the WWE, Blake, she won it on Saturday night's main event which was brought back out of mothballs for the first time since 2008, including an aged Jesse the Body Ventura, including the same music. Remember the song Obsession? Dun, 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 dun. And some of the same graphics from way back in the day of Saturday Night.
Now, that was on NBC.
Which it always used to be. Because
no, it was on NBC this weekend, though, was it?
Yeah.
Because Saturday Night Live was on this weekend.
It was early.
Oh, it was early. I
but
see.
You can forgive Blake for this because if you're of our vintage, your whole day was planned around Saturday with anticipation for that show. This was some of the great casts, of course.
Well, and you also couldn't watch it on a tilt on the Eastern feed. You had to wait till 11:30.
Yeah. But you waited even more for Saturday night main event.
Well, it was a can't lose. It was a can't lose. You either got Saturday Night Live or you got a main event. It was great.
What, about 4 times a year you got Saturday night main event?
Yep.
And you knew that a title could change hands there. That was big. Remember? Yeah. Titles weren't just going to change hands during your regular tapings. They were going to either be at the big pay-per-views, and there were fewer pay-per-views back then.
Well, there's no patsies on the main event versus all the patsies that you saw on the regular program.
Mm-hmm.
Corporal Kirchner wouldn't have been on main event.
I'm flipping through the dial. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? It's like a flashback to my youth. Yes, first time since 2008 we've had a Saturday night's main event. And a British Columbian getting over. Title holder. Congratulations, Chelsea. Poll question results. Siri Mitsubishi poll question results from Friday. Does Kevin Lankinen have a shot at a Vezina Trophy nomination? Yes or no? What did the people say?
Yes.
No, they said no. 62%. Graham, he has been fantastic, but I think in the eyes of voters, he is still a backup, and I doubt they would vote for him. Brendan, if Allmark can win a Vezina as a tandem of Swayman, then Lankinen should be able to do the same if he keeps this play up. And Dermott, only if the Canucks declare him goalie of the future and trade Demko.
Well, here's the thing.
Boy, we're trading a lot of core players.
With Demko, and it's really through no fault of his own, but nevertheless, the stats are not going to be super kind to Demko after these first 2 games. But if every rebound game is a Lankinen game, like I don't know about Lankinen tonight coming off the flu, if he's playing or not. But if they keep on rebounding, if the up spikes are always Lankinen nights, that's going to look really good. Like Lankinen looks like he's then sort of rebounding Demko's tough outings, which will look good with the voters at the very least.
Errors and omissions. We had a dreadful audio issue creep up in the moments before the show went live on Friday. Ultimately got it fixed. Apologies that the show was a little delayed on Friday. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. Facebook. What did I miss? X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. Live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. We'll be going all week here. And please do support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.